Hi everyone, welcome to Fine Art by Amy. In today's video I'm going to show you how I drew this realistic brunette plait using coloured pencils. I like to work in sections when I'm drawing this hairstyle as I just find it the easiest and quickest way to work. The first thing that I do is lay down the base layer. In this case I'm using brown ochre as that's the lightest colour that I've chosen for drawing brown hair. I then go in with the burnt sienna, and this is just to map out the direction of the hair. I'm going to leave a bit of the brown ochre showing through as that's where my highlight's going to be, and that's how you'll achieve a glossy look to your hair. It's important to have a really sharp pencil when you're drawing hair as that's the easiest way to show the texture of the hair and each individual strand. I then go in with the walnut brown to map out where the dark areas and shadows are within the hair. I don't want to go straight in with the black as at this stage it's a little bit too harsh and I'm not sure if I'm actually going to need the black. I'd like to wait until a few layers in when the hair really starts coming together to decide whether or not the black is necessary. It's important to keep referring to your reference photo if you're trying to get that really realistic look and pay attention to all the details that are on your reference photo. You can see here that I'm only doing quite light layers. You don't want to press too hard as you're going to damage the tooth of your paper. I then go back in with the burnt sienna just to put back in some of the detail that I've lost from using the walnut brown. As you can see, I'm leaving a bit of the brown ochre showing through as that's where my highlight's going to be, so I don't want it to get too dark. At this stage I'm making sure that everything is blending together nicely as I don't want there to be a harsh transition between the lights, darks and midtones. I then blend everything together with the brown ochre. Some artists will use a white coloured pencil or a pencil blender or possibly odourless mineral spirits. I just prefer to use the lightest colour that I'm using on that particular piece as it keeps the colour saturated and you don't lose too much of the detail. I then go ahead and layer all the other different colours according to what I feel is the best match for the reference picture. I tend to leave the colours nougat, walnut brown, burnt umber and black for the darker areas. For the lighter areas I'll use brown ochre, burnt sienna, Van Dyke brown and light layers of the nougat. I then want to brighten up the highlight a little bit, so I use the white luminance to go back in and just lift that colour up a little bit. But because I want it to look realistic and natural, I then go back in with the brown ochre and tone it back down a little bit. But what you're left with is a brighter highlight than you had before, but it still looks like a more realistic, natural brown haired colour. Here I'm using the burnt umber just to put in some of those shadows as I've lost some of the darkness from blending. I'm just using light layers as I don't want to damage the tooth of the paper or go too dark too quickly. Here I'm using the nougat colour to go over the burnt umber, just again to help darken up the shadows. by layering, you really add in depth to your piece of work. I'm just toning down the highlight now, as because I've put in the shadows, I'm realising that the highlight is a bit too stark, so it needs toning down just a little bit. So in the reference picture, there's a lot of really dark areas, and the best way for me to get those dark areas is to go in with light layers of the black. To keep the brown tone that I need for the piece, I then go over the black with the burnt sienna colour. So again, on this next section of plait, I start off exactly the same with a light layer of the brown ochre. And just like before, I then go in with the burnt sienna to map out the direction of the hair. I then use the walnut brown to put in the shadows. It's also good to remember that you may not use every single colour for every section of hair. You may only need a couple of the colours, or you may need all of them, depending on what the reference picture is telling you to do. And again, I'm blending through with the brown ochre just to blend in those first few layers and make them look really nice and smooth. Here I'm using the Van Dyke brown because that's the colour that I think is most suitable for matching the reference picture. I know I've been mentioning the reference picture quite a lot, but to achieve that realistic look, it's really important for you to pay attention to your reference picture and the direction of the hair, the colours that you see. And again, I'm just going in with the white luminance to brighten up that highlight a little bit, but then making it slightly more demure than I've made it by going back in with the brown ochre. I'm now using the nougat colour to put back in some shadows that I've lost from all the blending. So So I can see that the shadow needs to be darker than it is, so I'm going back in with the burnt umber and just layering it over the nougat. So there's some really deep dark colours in the hair, so I've decided to use the black, but I'm only using light layers because I don't want to go to the point of no return. I then use the burnt sienna to go over the black to give it more of a brown tone and to make sure that the black isn't too stark. Now this section is almost complete, I can see that the highlight is still a bit too bright, so I tone it down some more with the brown ochre until I'm happy with how it looks. I'm just using my own judgment here to go back in with the coloured pencils and just make sure that everything's looking as I want it to. For this last section, I'm not going to talk over it, I'm just going to let you watch it in real time so you can make your own notes. For the next step of drawing realistic hair, we need to put in the flyaway wispy hairs that occur naturally. To do this, I make sure that I've got really sharp points on my pencils, and I'll use a handful of the colours that I've already used just to draw random lines that are coming away from the hair. They don't need to be particularly neat because flyaway hairs aren't neat and they can go in any direction, so just have a bit of fun with this bit. I then use my eraser to erase 85 to 90% of the colour from the hair that I've just drawn in. This really makes the hair look fine and wispy. To do the flyaway hairs within the main body of the plait, I used the white luminance and again just draw random hairs in all directions. Because I want the wispy flyaway hairs to look natural, I tone the white down with the brown ochre. In this close-up you can see the wispy hairs that we've put in both on the outside of the plait and within the main body. So that's it for my tutorial video. I hope you found it useful. If you have, please give it a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more. I'll see you next time. Thanks, bye.